In today's video, I'm going to show you an absolutely incredible game played by Magnus Carlsen. And you know, his games are always good. Whenever he is playing, people want to see his games. But his games are getting even more interesting when he's playing against someone who is not afraid to play world's #1. Well, such a guy is Vladimir Fedoseev. Super strong grandmaster, originally from Russia, nowadays representing Slovenia. He's world's 41 with a rating of almost 2700, but also a true blitz specialist. And the two, they are playing a mini match, friendly match on chess.com with a short time control. This game was played with 3 minutes for both players. So that will explain the number of mistakes we get to see in this game. But it makes it even more exciting for us. So make sure to watch this video from the beginning till the end. In the meantime, you can of course support the channel by hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, or even make a donation via PayPal. Thank you for the overwhelming support and keep it coming. And then I have no other choice but to show you an amazing game, which we are going to check out now. Let's have a look. Fedoseev is playing with the white pieces. He goes for 1d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3. And here we have the Grunfeld defense. The good old Grunfeld, which was the favorite opening of, for instance, Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov, also Magnus has been playing it a lot. It's a very dynamical opening, and also this game will really show you why exactly. Knight f3, bishop g7, this is all very standard. And now, small surprise, very interesting move. It's the move h3. And I see you're wondering, what is the purpose of this move? I mean, white still has to develop his bishops, bring his king into safety. Well, the idea becomes clear very, very soon. Castling kingside, played by black. White captures on d5. So we do get some kind of a rather unknown variation of the exchange line. So white captures, then after black recaptures, white occupies the center with the move e4, knight c3. Pawn takes back, c5, bishop e2. Well, this is all pretty standard. But the interesting thing is this little pawn move h3. Because very often in this variation, now after, let's say, take on d4, black's main plan is to exert pressure against the pawn on d4 by means of moves like bishop g4, knight c6. And with bishop g4, you're indirectly threatening to eliminate the defender of the d4 pawn. So that's why the pawn on h3 is actually quite useful. Now let's see what happened in the game. Knight c6 played, bishop e3, and black puts the queen on a5 with check. How to stop the check? Well, the bishop goes back to d2, attacking the queen. And now the queen goes to a3. If you are thinking what is going on, well, the guys are probably still in book. This is still kind of a well-known idea in a lot of lines. The queen is quite actively placed, can always come back to d6, but very soon also the rook wants to come to the d file to hit the pawn on d4. Now, interesting moment in the game as white goes for the move d5, and this is not a blunder. This is a well-known exchange sacrifice, as black has the option here to take the rook on a1. But if you do that, after bishop takes, queen takes, this was actually all not played in the game, but it's very important for your understanding. Black is seriously weakening the dark squares. This bishop on g7 is missed. It's a very important defender. Also, the knight on c6 is hanging. And on the next move, white will likely put a bishop on h6, hit the rook, but even more importantly, threatening checkmate on g7. So this is a very typical positional exchange sacrifice in the Grunfeld. I mean, it's still theory, but let's not get into it. Magnus, as often, he tries to play it more safe with the move knight d4, offering the exchange of knights. But this move also has some drawbacks. Knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. Now, okay, still the bishop hits the rook. This time white decides to put the rook on b1, which is in fact also quite a typical idea, so that you do exert pressure against the pawn on b7. It's still defended, but it makes it harder for black to complete development. The bishop on c8, if it moves, then white is ready to take that pawn on b7. Now, a lot of interesting ideas here. Black decided here to take the pawn on a2. Of course, this is a typical theme in the Grunfeld as well, especially in the rook b1 lines, that now all of a sudden black does have two outside passed pawns. But there is still a lot of other things going on the board. It's not an endgame yet. If a lot of pieces are going to be exchanged, these two pawns, they are potentially very, very dangerous. But there are still a lot of other pieces on the board. And white, first things first, decides to castle here. Bring the king into safety. Black played move b6 to free the bishop from its defensive task. And here, a lot of options here for white as well. But white played the move bishop b5. So I guess the main idea is to go bishop c6 to hit the rook. If the rook ever goes to b8, for instance, then there is also the move bishop f4. So the rook can easily get in trouble. By the way, when the bishop from d2 is moving, then also the bishop on d4 of black will be hanging. So there are some dynamical problems here for black to be solved first. We can certainly not think of any endgame here yet. Look at this. Bishop a6 is played. Black is offering the exchange of light squared bishops. But rather than doing something about that bishop, look at this. Bishop h6 was played by Fedoseev. Very interesting move as the queen hits the bishop on d4. That means that if you take on b5, its queen takes d4 with too many threats. Rook is hanging, also the bishop on b5 is hanging, white's going to win a lot of material. If you, for instance, decide now to go back with the bishop to g7, so that your own bishop is no longer hanging, you're defending against the threat of the rook on f8, white's going to take on g7, and after king recaptures, it's rook to a1 and the queen on a2, as well as the bishop on a6. They are in trouble. So that means that black is forced to give up material. That is not such a big problem. It's a very typical thing. Here black goes for the move bishop f6. So after bishop takes f8, Magnus decides to take with the king. Even taking with the rook on f8 is also another interesting possibility. But after the exchange of light squared bishops, bishop takes a6, queen takes a6, how should we evaluate this endgame? Now, position becomes more clear. A lot of pieces are coming off the board. But okay, these pawns, they have potential. If they come up the board, let's say a pawn on a2, then this bishop on f6 is a really good piece, not only protecting its own king, defending the king, but also supporting the march of one of these queenside pawns. So what should do white instead? In the meantime, well, try to play as actively as possible. And you can do that by trying to improve your major pieces. Your major pieces as white, they want to hit the enemy's king. And therefore, the next move, f4, is a very good move. White is about to go e5 and trap the bishop. So bishop goes to c3. And here, a lot of interesting moves. I mean, you can hit the bishop in various ways with a queen or with one of your rooks. Perhaps you can also push the pawn anyway to e5. I think white is having a good time here, but Fedoseev decides to play the move f5. He wants to open up the f-file for his rook. Look at this. Now, one of the positional drawbacks of such a move is that you're no longer really able to push your e-pawn. Black is trying to set up a blockade on the dark square. So imagine that the bishop, with the support of a pawn or another piece, is able to control it. It will be difficult for white to break through. And I think black should try to consolidate the position here with something like a queen a3. This is an incredibly difficult move, but the queen can always try to come back to c5 with check or even to d6. And from there on, it's guarding the 6th rank. I mean, black is fighting here. Very interesting game. But instead, Magnus pushes the pawn to b5 with the aim of coming to b4. Once again, it's not a forced position. There are many options for both sides. Fedoseev comes up with a very logical move. He goes for queen d3, hitting the bishop and also pinning the pawn on b5, which means that b4 cannot be played to defend the bishop. It will hang the queen on a6. Therefore, queen b6 first was played. And now after king h1, there followed the move b4. Razor sharp position. This bishop is having a double function. It's supporting the pawn on b4, but at the same time, it's still guarding the dark squares on the king side. Now, things are getting incredibly interesting. That's the reason I wanted to show you this game. Pawn takes g6 was played. How to recapture? Taking with the f-pawn is not allowed because the king is standing in the check then. You may consider taking with the queen, so the queen will be able to help out more on that side of the board. But White will probably continue with rook f5. The other rook can come in. Maybe you push the pawn to e6 or maybe d6 at some point. I mean, white has a lot of attacking ideas. So therefore, black decided here to take with the h-pawn, keeping the pawn formation intact. It is still one nice, little group of pawns together. Looks solid. And how is white going to break through? How is white going to hit the black king? Well, ask this to a super grandmaster. And here Fedoseev comes up with a brilliant idea. You may even pause the video for a second to find it out yourself which move Fedoseev played here. But he went for the move e5. This is an amazing pawn sacrifice. I mean, the pawn is about to join the attack. If it can come to e6, then it's even closing the 6th rank. So queen takes g6 becomes a threat. f7 is the main target. Well, black doesn't have much of a choice. Capture the pawn on e5. But now, the big move. This is the main reason of the previous pawn sacrifice. It's to come up with a second pawn sacrifice. This is so difficult to see, especially in a blitz game, but it's super strong. d6, what is the main idea behind this move? Well, if you do take the pawn, now these two pawns on d5 and e4, they're no longer there. And white can set up a double attack with the move queen f3, threatening checkmate in 1, but also hitting the rook on a8. And black is not able to neutralize both threats at the same time. Therefore, instead of taking the pawn on d6, black has to think about threats like queen f3, queen d5, defending the mating threat on f7. Bishop f6 was played, but now black's king's position is getting into some serious trouble here. D takes e7 with check. If you do take with the king, it's queen e4 with the same double attack as before. Also, if you would take with the bishop instead, there is also queen d5 once again, and black's position is falling apart. So black goes with the king to g7, supports the bishop, tries to stay safe with the king, but the pawn on e7 is still alive. Rook b e1, threatening to promote the passed pawn. Black has to go into defense. Rook e8, look at this, queen d7, hitting the rook. Black has to defend the rook on e8, maintain the blockade by going back with the queen. Now black's major pieces are super passive. But how is white going to break through? And this is a very important lesson I want to give to you here, is that you have a passed pawn and you're trying to think about how to promote a pawn. Well, always try to look for multiple targets, and the passed pawn alone is probably not going to be enough. What you have to try to do here is to play for an attack against the black king, especially here because these pieces, they are stuck on the back rank. They're unable to support the king. Now, with only like 40 seconds on the clock here, Fedoseev missed a huge opportunity. He could just have sacked the exchange on f6. Beautiful line. Let me show you what may happen. Now black is helpless against the mating attack of queen and rook. Rook will come to f1. If you go back to g7, the main point is queen d4, and after king g8 there is queen f6, and there's no way to defend the pawn on f7. Look at this. If you push the pawn to b3, queen takes f7, king h8, how is white going to win it? Well, there are various good moves. I like let's say the most human continuation is to simplify here with a nice queen sack. Queen takes e8, queen takes rook f8, and you see that white's passed pawn is much stronger. Queen takes, and you get a new queen yourself, and black can resign. So that is a fascinating line. I mean, black could maybe have tried to defend more stubbornly, but frankly speaking, in this line, I don't see a way out. If you try to run away with the king, there is rook takes f7. This pawn is way too strong. It means that the major pieces are tied down to the back rank. If you push the pawn in this case, then it's queen g4, king h6, queen h4 with checkmate. Very convincing line. So, missed chance. But what happened in the game? Rook e3 was played. Not a bad move. There are various ideas, like you may consider doubling rooks on the e-file. You may sometimes even think about doubling on the f-file to hit the bishop and indirectly the pawn on f7 as well. But Magnus grabs his chance. He goes for bishop c3, moves the bishop away. And here Fedoseev goes for rook d3. Magnus also getting lower on time. Doesn't have many useful moves to play here. Went for the move a6. Not really sure what his idea is, but he cannot do too much. But here another big moment in the game. 20 seconds on the clock for the remainder of this game. Fedoseev made a huge mistake here. He played the move rook d f3, hitting the pawn on f7. But after the move f6, everything is still nicely controlled by the bishop on c3. Let's go back for a second. Instead of rook d f3, look at this move, rook d6. This is a beautiful idea. Now, if you're careless, let's say you try to save your pawn, because the pawn was under threat, but maybe it was not wise idea at all to take it. The key idea is here to play for a mating attack. Once again, look at this, rook takes f7, king takes, and now the queen can come to e6. That's why the rook is on the 6th rank. King g7, this is leading to checkmate by force. Now the rook comes over, and it's just checkmate very soon. Here it is. Now you may think, okay, black can defend better, true. But if you play, for instance, something like f6, then anyway, queen will come to e6 with the threat to take this pawn. If you push it, there's rook takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. And well, you take on g6 on the next move. That's why that rook on d6 is so well placed. It's about to join the attack along the 6th rank. Well, missed opportunity. Rook df3 was played. f6 by Magnus as well. Queen e6. Look at this. Bishop defends the pawn on f6. So rook takes f6 is still a huge threat. But now queen e5. Excellent defensive move. And black would really like to welcome the exchange of queens. Everything is under control because at the end of the line, there is this passed pawn on the b file. I mean, there are still solid possibilities here. You can, for instance, take on f6, and after queen takes e6, rook takes e6, black will go a5. But you gotta watch out. And these pawns are pretty strong. So white instead played rook e3. Allowing the exchange of queens. But then also there is this move a5. And is this pawn dangerous or not? Well, certainly Fedoseev underestimated the strength of it. He played here the move rook d1. Probably he's looking for the possibility to come in with a rook to d8. But the king is always near. And the king even went to f7 at this point. Even hitting the rook on e6. Hitting the pawn on e7 with the king as well. Now after rook a6, there is the move b3. Fantastic move. The bishop supports the pawn on a5. And the pawn is coming to b2 very soon. Now, if we go back for 1 second, you should understand that b3, b2 is coming. How to prevent it? Well, white should have gone instead of rook d1 for the move rook c1. So that after b3, you can always take the bishop on c3. That would have been the way for white to stay in the game. Now, after rook d1, king f7, rook a6, b3... it is actually completely game over. Rook b6, getting behind the pawn. Now there's b2, rook to b3, attacking the bishop. But the bishop is absolutely safe on e5. Nicely supported, supporting the pawn on b2. And white is helpless. I mean, the rooks cannot become active after rook b1. They're followed, rook takes e7. That dangerous passed pawn has been eliminated here. And white has issues dealing with threats of, let's say, rook a7, a4, a3. When the pawns will be reconnected again, it will become a new queen at some point. There followed rook takes b2, not much else white could do here instead. So giving back the exchange was played, but the rook endgame is technically winning for black. And that's actually very easy for Magnus, because he knows that his rook belongs to the position behind the passed pawn. The rook is excellently placed here, which means that the white rook can not leave the defensive duty because the pawn will be pushed even further. Now after rook a3, you try to stop the pawn, but the king comes in. And the plan is very simple. Bring the king to b4, and that was played. White tried to generate some counterplay, but in vain, as black is just much faster. You can basically ignore the counter threats on the king side. You put a king on b4. The rook on the a7 square is even stopping the pawn on the h file. After the rook goes away, you play a3, a2, a1 queen. If you stay on the a file with the rook, the king will come to b3 and b2. White will be forced to give up the rook. And that's why at this point Fedoseev resigned. Absolutely amazing, but very instructive game. How to play with a material imbalance. How to play for the initiative. And when you do have such far advanced passed pawn, the game isn't over yet. Here in this game, Fedoseev clearly underestimated the counterplay of Black's connected passed pawns on the queen side, and rather than trying to play it solidly, he should have gone for the kill, playing for a mating attack with the major pieces and the passed pawn together. Hopefully you like this video, and if you do want to see more videos, make sure to come back to the channel and turn on the notifications, hit the subscribe button, so you make sure that you will not miss any of the future videos on this channel. Thanks for doing that, and see you soon again. Bye bye.